Oh, sorry guys. I was just liquid cooling this graphics card. So,
in today's video, we're talking about an ultra-budget gaming PC. I built a PC without paying a cent. And I know, you guys probably are very excited and definitely want to see this PC. Well, here it is. Yes, I know. This is beautiful.
Isn't she pretty?
Released in 2011, this rig is fucking fast. This is the PC you guys have been asking me to build forever. Oh, I just realized you can't actually see the computer parts. There's our I/O, there's our power supply, and inside is our computer. All jokes aside, this rig is like really fucking hot. And I don't mean because it's gonna overheat, because it's literally inside of a cardboard box. I'm guessing by now, you figured out why the case is so inexpensive. Because it is made of cardboard. I didn't cut a big enough piece out of the second Cheerios box. But I didn't want to cut it again, because I cut into the fucking bag on the inside. And Cheerios spilled everywhere. And now I have Cheerios all over my floor, and there's nothing I can do about it. Look at that expert screw job, if you know what I mean. This thing is a monster. Rocking a
Blazing fast
2.9 gigahertz, 2-core, 2-thread Pentium G2020 in a Dell Optiplex BTX proprietary motherboard with top-of-the-line DDR3 memory that's 8 gigabytes in dual-channel mode. It comes with an optional stand. This is rocking a GT 1030 graphics card. Not the greatest card on the planet, but a more than capable card at that. Now, you're probably waiting for me to actually turn this PC on, and I should probably actually just do that. One sec, let me hook it up to this monitor, this keyboard, and this mouse, and let's get this PC up and running so we can test how it performs in games. Alright guys, we got it all hooked up, let's turn this thing on. Again, I wanted to stick to a $0 budget, so we don't actually have a power button, per se. So, what we have to do is just take a screwdriver, and we just stick it in the side, and there we go. Just like that, our gaming PC is on. Hey, we're booting to Windows, that's perfect. Bro, I bet I can mine Bitcoin on this. Why is there barbecue sauce on the floor? Now, while we're booting up to Windows, let's talk about how I actually got these parts for $0. First things first, with the motherboard, CPU, and cooler. So I actually picked that up in a recycled Dell PC of some kind. I don't remember what kind it was. Basically, it was just sitting in a bin of old computer parts to be recycled, and it was one of the only useful things. I also picked up some older GPUs and stuff like that. The RAM for this build I stole from a PC at my work, and the graphics card I received in a build that I bought a while ago. If anyone remembers, I did an eBay scam PC where I ordered a scam PC on eBay, and I actually ended up getting a graphics card that I had not planned on getting in that for free, basically. So we put that in there with our GT 1030. And for storage, you'd think we would get some kind of used or recycled hard drive, but actually, I found an SSD laying in the same recycling pile, so I just popped it in. It's a 120 gigabyte old Samsung SSD. It's actually relatively old, but it functions. I mean, allegedly, like, it's, like, functional. Okay, there we go. I'm ready. Fucking 2-core, 2-thread. That makes me so sad. It's at 100% usage, like right now. Literally, if we open Task Manager, it's at 100%. It's not doing anything. It's at 100% usage. Alright guys, I've kind of baited it for long enough. I think it's time to see how this PC performs. So we have a couple of games to benchmark. Not really the newest games on the planet, because a $0 PC is probably not going to run the newest game. So sadly, Cyberpunk and Call of Duty, Cold War that is, are out of the question. But if we go a little bit older, let's say Grand Theft Auto 5, we can see that it's actually... Oh no. So choppy. That is very slow. But wait, Turns out we were at max settings. Let's turn down to minimum Grand Theft Auto 5 settings. Surprisingly enough, we're actually running at a decent FPS. 30 to 60, mostly around the 30s to 40s at most points in the game. Even during action is actually relatively impressive, but you may notice that the recording and yes, the gameplay is kind of choppy and there's a lot of freezes. Well, that's because the frame times are nothing short of atrocious. Basically, it was a stuttery mess. It was a little disappointing considering it was a decent FPS, but there was really no way to get the frame times up on this 2.9 gigahertz dual core without hyper-threading, especially on a game that came out about a year after the CPU came out. So, I don't think GTA is extremely playable, but if you think this is playable, go for it. $0 gaming PC can run GTA 5, 30 to 60 FPS. So, a game from 2013 isn't exactly ideal for a CPU that came out in 2012. So let's move on to a game that did come out in 2012. That would be Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Now, CSGO's recommended specs call for like a Core 2 Duo, and this is a Pentium. So this should actually work better than the minimum specs that CSGO lists. So logging on and hopping onto a retake match, bots only, because I don't want to burden my team of real people. And Dust 2, we can actually see at some points decent FPS if we're on the B site. So anywhere from 30 to 60, realistically speaking, 30 to 40 when we're not in a menu, with actually relatively okay frame times. But if we move to the A site on this map, we can see a much different story. The FPS is just a lot lower. Dust 2, usually the map that people who have no clue how this game works usually benchmark. The map that is actually the least demanding out of the competitive maps, therefore is a stupid benchmark that does not actually tell you if you can run the game properly. So if it can't run this map, it really can't run any competitive maps. If we move over to Wingman and try Dust 1, the first version of Dust, also a smaller map because of Wingman, we can actually see that our FPS gets surprisingly better. 60 to 70 FPS at some parts of the match and an actual, decent frame timings here. This is actually a really playable experience. Now, of course, if I were to use this PC in, real life, probably wouldn't be that great, and you'd probably be limited to just Wingman on CSGO, but I'm actually pretty surprised. For a PC I literally did not pay a cent for, short of buying the Cheerios to make the case, and my breakfast, 60 FPS on Wingman and CSGO is actually not that bad. I think it's time to move on to games that this PC was actually made for. So moving on to one of my all-time favorite games, Call of Duty Black Ops 2. Starting off with multiplayer on Hijacked, one of the best maps ever made in existence. Fight me. With bots, at least, we're actually getting, at some points, over 100 FPS, and this is actually on maximum settings in-game. And again, this is another game that came out in 2012, the same year as the CPU, so honestly, I'm pretty impressed at how well it's running in multiplayer. But let's move on to the best game mode in the game, Zombies. Yes, in Call of Duty Black Ops 2 Zombies, on one of the all-time best maps to ever exist, Origins, we're actually getting, again, at some points over 100 FPS, but on average about 80 to 90. Not bad. The frame timing could be a little better. There are some pauses here and there, but otherwise that is a relatively playable experience. Now, our CPU was locked to 100% the entire time, meaning that, surprisingly enough, even though we're using a GT 1030, we are very CPU bottlenecked. I guess 2 cores, 2 threads is not too great, especially with Windows running all these background tasks, kind of killing half the performance, but that's the point. Black Ops 2, multiplayer, zombies, definitely a great rig. So this PC would actually make a pretty good retro zombies rig. And finally, I want to move on to a game that came out before this CPU so that we can actually see what the max performance would be of a system like this in its time. And so we have another one of my all-time favorite games, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Now, actually, we can see in Modern Warfare 3 Survival, on the map Arkaden, that we do actually get a little bit less FPS than on Black Ops 2, and this is, again, max settings 1080p. But the frame timing felt a lot better. The pacing, the time between frames felt way smoother. There were much less freezes. It was a much smoother and better experience. Now, one thing I noticed is that our CPU was not at 100% usage at all times, like in the other games. But I think that's just an issue with the game itself not using 2 whole threads, which is surprising, even though this game came out in like 2011. But this was still a great experience, and for, again, $0, if I can play Modern Warfare 3, If my whole PC cost is the cost of Modern Warfare 3 on PC, which you could probably find for free somewhere, this is just a fun little, you know, retro COD. This is a fun little old school COD, old school survival little rig to just put together. And I'm actually extremely happy with it. So, that's really it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys kind of enjoyed my little cardboard box machine. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. How do I turn it off? Buy my merch. I don't make merch.
You don't have merch.
I think we're done here.